Good morning, guys. The topic that we are going to discuss today is about China's public diplomacy in Europe during COVID-19. First of all, we are going to mention the background of this topic for a better understanding. The appearance of COVID-19, without a doubt, it has put China at the center of attention in global conversations, ranging from China's political responsibility for being the epicenter of the pandemic outbreak to the Chinese government's efforts to shape foreign perception of the country and regain its reputation. In Europe specifically, the pandemic had an accelerated increase since March 2020, causing a crisis not only in health but also an economic and political crisis within the continent. A crisis that raised doubts about European solidarity and the functioning of the Union European, and that relations between the Asian country and the European continent worsened. However, as the crisis it intensified, it gave way to opportunities in which Chinese ambassadors and state media tried to shore up the country's reputation and reposition themselves within the international community, offering supplies to different states while other countries, such as the United States, faced each other uncontrollable challenges within its territory. This is how the crisis provide the opportunity to study the strategies used by the country regarding the donation of medical supplies and other tools are part of public diplomacy campaigns. Highlighting this as this is an attempt to divert attention from its responsibility for the outbreak of the pandemic. It is worth mentioning that it is a global influence campaign that China has been carrying out for a long time, and that with the health crisis it has become more notorious. Next, China's public diplomacy in Europe during the COVID-19 pandemic will be explored in depth. Next.
China's public diplomacy or propaganda. China's public diplomacy used in different ways to promote itself during the pandemic. The example we take can be confused between public diplomacy or propaganda, but this is not the case for the following reasons. First, public diplomacy differs from propaganda by its contents. While propaganda tries to convince the public with illusions or created situations, public diplomacy tries to convince people with the truth, but managed at the convenience of the state. That is, it uses the both good and bad things to send a message and convince people. China was blamed for the COVID pandemic. During the pandemic, China used the so-called world warriors, diplomatics, which consists of diplomatics responding to attacks by the world leaders and on social networks. These people were in charge of spreading and responding to the accusations. The diplomatic corps also reported on the Chinese campaign. The Chinese campaigns for mass consist of held aid to countries in Europe and Latin America. China sought to clean up its image. The campaign showed, for example, the rapid construction of hospitals and interviews with doctors about the development of the disease. China was the economy that recovered the fastest. On the other hand, China's campaign is public diplomacy because it used the COVID context to improve its international relations. China accepted part of the blame and used that information to carry out its campaign. China used medical supplies and demonstrated its rapid recovery as a benchmark, and that influenced the acceptance of Europe and these people. However, China also withheld information about the virus and attacked the population that gave versions against the government. It is also a characteristic of public diplomacy. States look for the ways to highlight the good things and actions and hide the bad, even through its public knowledge. Finally, China used the vaccine diplomacy as a new campaign to sell its vaccines. The promotion of vaccines is a response to Russia and the USA that also developed their vaccines. Latin America countries began applying to Chinese vaccines and established health cooperation agreements. These countries promote vaccines with rapid immunization campaigns. This action made an international call to demonstrate acceptance of Chinese vaccines. That's the final step in China's public diplomacy. And in conclusion, China's public diplomacy about masks and vaccines is not propaganda because it's a successful example of the China's applying the techniques of public diplomacy. And now my partner is going to talk about more of the subject.
Thank you, Alejandra. Well, now we are going to talk about the success of digital diplomacy. We have chosen this public diplomacy campaign as it is a success case and contains elements that have helped China maintain its soft power in a global crisis scenario. The first element we will analyze is how this campaign has adapted to the new era of communication technologies. In a globalized world, information travels more easily between national and international spheres. Today, dissemination of information in real time has contributed to generate a new element of power for states. As we know, China was the center of criticism for international public opinion because of the COVID-19 crisis. As the pandemic began to spread, Beijing used its global media infrastructure to seed positive narratives about China in the domestic media. And also, it has intensified its new offerings, providing country-specific national and international content in non-Anglophone languages. By the end of 2020, China has used the COVID-19 pandemic to boost its image in global media coverage. According to the International Federation of Journalists, it is estimated that globally 56% of countries report that coverage of China has become more positive overall since the COVID-19 outbreak. And in another study, when countries were asked to rate how coverage of China had changed since the pandemic on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being very negative and 10 being very positive, Europe was the continent which saw the biggest positive changes to China coverage, scoring 6.3. Another examples are the tweets from the French ministry spokesman Sauli Jam showcase a conspiracy websites, including one to claim COVID-19 was brought to China by U.S. soldiers attending to army games in Wuhan. That narrative was then amplified across social media by an army of Chinese ambassadors and other French ministry spokesmen, who became known as practicing warrior diplomacy. And the final example is the case of Tunisia, where a new hospital was inaugurated, built with 70 million in Chinese aid. Beijing has invested in sponsoring pages on social media promoting China and its presence in Tunisia, showing itself to the world as a savior for Tunisia and another countries. Next, please.
China's public diplomacy on listening, which the totally negative image that obtained China after the COVID-19 in Europe. The public diplomacy program implemented by Chinese country in 10 countries of the European Union made the intervention of the media achieve a totally different image of China with respect to the pandemic. Of the countries surveyed, the survey showed that 7 of the 10 countries have a more positive international image of China, recognize the aid and acknowledge China's positive management of the crisis. In this sense, we can qualify this program as a successful program for China that had an impact in 7 European countries. Listening has an element of public diplomacy played a very important role in meeting the needs of European countries in terms of experience and dealing with the pandemic as well as resources. In addition, the effectiveness of this program lies in the application of proactive and visible public diplomacy, where factors such as public debate, research, data collection, high frequency international with the media, public esteems, and the use of social media achieve a more positive image of China in this approach to the crisis in this ability to provide aid and assistance. However, although China applied this public diplomacy program for 10 countries, China did not achieve a positive view from the foreign public in Sweden, France, and Germany. And this country recognized that Chinese assistance has been minimal and have considered the Chinese authorities' management of the pandemic to be negative. In this sense, it can be mentioned that China has managed to generate a more positive image in certain countries, but not achieve a totally positive change of image in the foreign public of these three countries. So, China should apply a different public diplomacy and a new method of listening where data collection is aimed at knowing the interests and needs of the public of Sweden, France, and Germany. In this way, China will be able to convey the image it expects reflect in Europe. Thank you for your attention.